Good afternoon and welcome to the December Q&A virtual lunch hour with Jason Killeen. I'm your host, Jason Killeen. I'm an Assistant Executive Director with the Department of Cannabis Regulation. My welcome remarks for today are centered around Council File number 23-1256. The City Attorney's Office has prepared and presented an ordinance that was adopted and signed into the law by the Mayor, which extended the period of time for Phase 3 Retail Round 2 applicants to complete their pre-application review. So that was extended through December 31st of 2026. It also extended DCR's authority to grant new temporary approval to social equity individual applicants that were seeking licenses for the retail activities, whether it's retail storefront or retail delivery. So thankfully that was signed into law, and it did have an urgency clause, so it became effective immediately. And with that, we can go ahead and jump into the questions.
Good afternoon, Jason. Our first question comes from these individuals: Jesus D, Doug W, Sam M, and Roxanne S. How will the passage of SB 51 in October and yesterday's ordinance extending the one-year application deadline for round 2 applicants going to affect them?
So Senate Bill 51 extended the period of time for social equity applicants to seek a new state provisional license, and that will go into law at the state level in January. The corresponding local ordinance was signed into law by the mayor earlier this week, which allows local law to align with the intent of SB 51. So that extended the period of time for Phase 3 Retail Round 2 social equity individual applicants to submit their pre-application records to move forward in the application process, as well as extended DCR's authority to grant temporary approval to social equity individual applicants seeking licensure for either the retail storefront or the non-storefront delivery retail licenses. So at the local level, the mayor and city council, with the assistance of the city attorney, have already amended local law to integrate into our process the intent of SB 51.
Thanks, Jason. Our next question comes from Javier B. What is the absolute fastest time that I will be able to open a storefront dispensary once you submit an attestation page?
You know, at the end of the day, the attestation page is just a part of the local application process. You still have to move forward with the Department of Building and Safety, the county's public health department, potentially the fire department, and of course the Department of Cannabis Control. So it's really hard to give you an estimate of time just based on a singular document. But ultimately, you're able to open up your shop once you've met all of the local requirements as well as the state requirements. And I've seen it done in as little as 90 days, but that is generally the exception, not the rule.
Our next question also comes from Javier B. If you see the DCR map with pending licenses, yet the PCN has still not been met, what are the actions that actually seal your place on the list first before others? For instance, is it the attestation as well as the licensing fee? Please be as specific as possible.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. If you see the DCR map with pending licenses, yet the PCN has still not been met, what are the actions that actually seal your place on the list before others? For instance, is it the attestation as well as the licensing fee? Please be as specific as possible.
Okay, it sounds like there's a couple of different things happening within the question. So first, as it relates to the licensing map, we've got pre-applications, pending applications, and licensed locations. For the purposes of identifying undue concentration is based on the number of licenses DCR has issued within a community plan area. So a location does not count towards undue concentration until a license is issued, which is why areas like Hollywood, you'll see more applications pending than DCR has the authority to grant licenses for. So the pending applications don't actually do anything towards undue concentration until a license is issued. Separately, with the applications and the buffering and whether or not somebody has, in air quotes, planted their flag, that occurs once the applicant has completed their pre-application review and submitted their either annual license application or temporary approval application. The filing of that application is when the applicant plants their flag. And to file an application, you have to submit all of the required documents as part of that application process, as well as pay the corresponding fees. So folks that have navigated through pre-application but have not submitted their application, or folks that have gone through pre-application and have a pending PCN request, they of course have not planted their flag because they don't have an application pending before the department.
Thank you, Jason. The next question from Ray Z. Considering that social equity is up to help people harmed by cannabis laws, is it possible to allow already selected lottery individuals to complete the process before selecting more applicants?
When folks that were selected as part of the lottery process basically were given the opportunity to submit their applications, with the extension of SB 51 and the period of time phase 3 retail round 2 folks have, I don't think it's likely that we would wait a whole nother 3 years to open up a new lottery process. That's something we've been kind of talking about, is making sure that we conduct another lottery sometime in 2024 to select additional social equity individual applicants to have the opportunities to apply for the retail storefront activity. So I don't think we would actually wait until 2027 to reopen that process. But the intent is to give folks the opportunity to look for and apply for the commercial cannabis retail storefront activity while still allowing other folks to participate in this process.
Our next question from Shady M. When can I apply for an equity grant?
At this time, the social equity team has already wound down the rental assistance grant, so that grant opportunity is no longer available, but they are applying for CEG funds for calendar year 2024. And then based on the amount awarded and what those monies can be used for, there may be an opportunity for additional equity-related grants being made available sometime in 2024. If you have questions about the different programs that the social equity team offers, I would recommend emailing them at dcr.sep@lacity.org.
Our next question comes from Doug W. Do we need a certificate of occupancy to get the health department site evaluation? Does the answer change if you're phase 2 cultivation or newly licensed retail delivery? At what point do social equity businesses need the certificate of occupancy? I know there's a lot of questions there, so if you need me to repeat any part, let me know.
Uh, I'll throw out an answer, and if I miss anything, let me know. So all licensed businesses, regardless of whether they're a general applicant or a social equity applicant, have to comply with all local and state laws. Part of that process does require folks to have a health permit that corresponds with their commercial cannabis activity. Separately, for the certificate of occupancy, that goes to the activity tied to the building. And that's part of the building code and laws that the Department of Building and Safety administer. So every business is going to have to get a corresponding health permit for any commercial cannabis activity tied to their licensed activities. You should have a certificate of occupancy that aligns with the activities that you're conducting at a specific location. For folks that were part of phase one, phase two, you still have to have the certificate of occupancy, and you could be cited for non-compliance by the Department of Building and Safety. But for DCR's purposes, we don't verify the certificate of occupancy, the health permits, and some of the other requirements until we've issued the annual license and the licensee is requesting their final inspection. At the point at which you request your final inspection, that's when we're verifying the certificate of occupancy, that you have your health permits, you have all of your corresponding licenses from the state, and that's prior to us granting you an operating permit under the annual license process.
Perfect, thank you. Roxanne S. asks, does the 1 year refiling deadline for those that abandon their retail applications still apply with the new ordinance?
Yes, it does. So refiling is separate and apart from what the mayor and city council adopted into law recently. The recent ordinance extended the period of time for the lottery winners to go ahead and submit their phase three retail round two application, and it extends it through December 31st, 2026. And it also grants DCR the authority to consider and grant new temporary approval to social equity individual applicants pursuing the retail storefront or non-storefront delivery retail license types. Prior to this new ordinance, the mayor and city council had already extended the refiling deadline from 1 year to 3 years to give folks additional time to find compliant locations and then to get back into the process. So if your record was previously deemed abandoned, you have up to 3 years from the date you were notified of that abandonment to submit your new pre-application review record and start moving back forward with the licensure process.
Stephen L. asks, an annual payment was timely made to the Office of Finance, but the DCR portal still reflects an amount due. When will the DCR portal be updated to reflect the payments?
So ultimately, that'll come down to when we're notified that payment was received. Several hundred licensees mailed their payments in on or around the last day for it to be considered timely. And the last time I talked to finance, they were still processing those mailed in payments. Given the fact that like the postmark date determines whether or not it's timely received, as soon as the payment's processed and it appears on an LA tax report, when the DCR team gets that report, they'll go ahead and clear the payment through the DCR licensing portal, and then it'll show as due. If you did mail in your payment via check, you can always check your statements to see whether or not the payment has cleared your bank account to kind of have a general idea of when DCR may be notified. Generally, within 5 days of the payment clearing your bank, we'll get an LA tax report from finance that reflects the payment.
Our next question from Lavon E. Can two applicants submit an attestation from within the same shopping center, but completely different units?
If it's related to the pre-application process and the landowner attestation, the answer is yes, because at that point in time, neither of those prospective applicants have planted a flag, and we don't actually monitor the attestations or where they're coming from. So whether it's the same landlord within the same shopping center or landlords that are, looking at having a prospective cannabis business come in, as part of the pre-app process, it wouldn't preclude us from considering pre-apps in the same general geographic area because neither of them would create a sensitive use that would buffer the other one out at that point in time.
Okay, thank you. Nat C asks, what are the prerequisites to obtain the newly amended law for on-site consumption venues?
So at this point in time, the city of LA does not license or otherwise allow for on-site consumption venues. The bill, which I believe was AB 374, was introduced at the state level, but that was vetoed by the governor. And again, at this point, the city does not have a license offering for either on-site consumption or, cannabis lounges or special events.
Thanks, Jason. Lynette S asks, what is available or what areas are available for dispensaries?
I would refer you to the DCR website. On the webpage that we have, the DCR licensing map, we have a chart that shows which community plan areas have reached undue concentration. Off the top of my head, I know Central City North, Venice, Harbor Gateway have all reached undue concentration, but there may be additional community plan areas that are also considered unduly concentrated for the retail storefront activity.
Darwin B asks, I'm waiting for my annual license to be approved and I can't get hold of my analyst. What should I do?
I would recommend emailing the department.
Thank you. Stephanie R asks, is the public health permit deadline of 1/24 only for retail and micro businesses? And what is the deadline or who is the deadline specifically for?
So every business is going to have to get their health permit. Specifically, there's advanced deadlines for the retailers with on-site sales to get their public health permit in emblem so that consumers know which are the licensed locations to help with our public health and public safety efforts. But everybody is going to have to get their health permit, but we will be enforcing the health permit requirement for retail storefronts first.
Stephanie R asks, can a licensee who has 3 separate licenses, for example, manufacturing, cultivation, and distribution, under the same entity, sell one of the 3?
I wouldn't say sell, but you would have the ability to initiate an entity substitution for 1, 2, or all 3 of the activities. So they could be bifurcated.
Anahi T asks, for the PCN license 4002 form, Do we need to wait until a council file is established, or should that form be sent out before?
You'll have to wait until you're assigned a council file number so that the forms can get uploaded to that council file.
And a follow-up from Anahi T. Where can I find the official Chamber of Commerce information for each community plan? Downtown LA has multiple chambers.
Um, I believe there's a website, lachamber.com, where you can get more information about the LA Chamber of Commerce and the geographic areas.
Lisa G asks, how does SB 51 and this new ordinance affect Phase 3 Part 1 applicants who abandoned their application by June 30th, 2023?
So SB 51 and the new ordinance extend the period of time for the Department of Cannabis Control and the Department of Cannabis Regulation to issue provisional licenses or temporary approvals to social equity applicants pursuing the retail activities. So it would, if you refile an abandoned application, you would have the ability to pursue a provisional license and temporary approval.
Our next question from Frederick W. I was verified in 2022, but wasn't selected in the lottery. When will the social equity program retail license verification and lottery reopen?
That's to be determined. At this point, we don't have a date for when we'll conduct the next lottery.
A question from Sherry M. As an applicant that does not currently hold a state license, we are looking to move forward on the annual review as soon as possible. Will DCR have a department or a contact designated to answer questions regarding annual review, or should applicants continue to reach out to their assigned DCR analyst for information on the status of their application?
For information about the status of a specific application, it's best to reach out to your analyst because they're the ones that are best positioned to answer specific questions. If they're just general questions about the annual license application process or when global timelines are going to open up, you can reach out to the department via email or phone during our normal business hours.
Sherry M asks, is DCR able to provide a timeline for how long it is expected to take to complete the CEQA review process?
There's not a specific timeline, and what's led to a lot of the confusion is the the processing and review of the 4013 form does not complete the actual CEQA review process for the state's purposes. The state does not consider the environmental analysis complete um, until we filed either the final environmental review documents or filed a notice of exemption with the county. And we can't get to that point until either the director or the Cannabis Regulation Commission have adopted the environmental review findings in conjunction with the recommendation to issue an annual license. So your CEQA documents are not considered complete until the first level decision maker has adopted the recommendation to issue an annual license. And staff are starting to prepare the reports that will be part of the final application documents. So once we deem the application complete and we send out our notices of completion, that starts the timeline for either preparing the final report for the director's approval or starting the community hearing process and then submitting the DCR report to the commission for further consideration. I expect that the first annual licenses will start to be issued or at least approved probably in April or May of next year. So that kind of gives you a general timeline on when the first ones will actually be deemed complete for the state's purposes.
Thank you. The next question comes from Yokyu Y. Can I apply if I have a retail store ready?
It depends on what you're applying for. If you're a verified social equity individual applicant, you can apply for delivery, manufacturing, distribution, testing. Then if you're a general applicant, you can also apply for manufacturing, um, distribution transport only, or testing. So in order to apply for the retail storefront activity, you would have to have been selected to submit an application. And at this point, we don't have any open processes where you would be able to apply for a new retail storefront license.
Our next question comes from a few individuals, Mike S., Timothy, and Luan. Is there something wrong with the licensing map? Also, would you be able to show us how a selected lotto participant can use the licensing map to see if a certain location is eligible due to previous illegal activity?
So Google updated the parameters for the Google Maps, and they've reduced the number of data points that can be added as a part of a single layer. So we're trying to work through those new data constraints. So not all of the information we once had on the map is able to be populated on the map as it currently exists. So we're hoping to get that up and running again as soon as possible or transition to a different product that gives us greater capacity to input data. Separately, um, we are working with the different enforcement agencies to get data as it relates to properties that would be considered scorched earth and ineligible for commercial cannabis activity. And that information will start to go up on the DCR licensing map once we work through some of the issues with getting the pre-existing data up there. So all I can say right now is stay tuned for either an updated licensing map or a transition to a new mapping software.
Our next question comes from Mike S. Is it true that an applicant does not secure their spot within a community plan area, which is subject to undue concentration until they receive TA from DCR? If so, can DCR please publish a live tracker of pending applications and available spots within the CPA for both retail and cultivation licenses?
So it is true that an application or a license does not count towards the undue concentration for a community plan area until a license is issued. And there's no guarantee that pending applications will result in licensure until an actual license is issued. As it relates to cultivation, we haven't accepted cultivation licenses since round or phase 2 back in 2018. And the mayor and city council had already adopted a law that would allow for DCR to issue a license for any of the folks that had a cultivation application pending. So for the purposes of cultivation, if we have an application pending, we will be able to issue a license within that community plan area. And that data is not actually published. For the purposes of the retail, I would recommend looking at the DCR licensing map as well as the table that we've put together below it. And then if you want to go ahead and send us an email in terms of what you're thinking about in, for a live tracker, that's something that the department could take into consideration if it's feasible.
And then our next question from Jim T. We posted all required documents by October 1st for our annual application. If we have not heard from our analysts yet, will we still have 30 days to correct or respond?
I would recommend reaching out directly to your analyst to see where they are in reviewing the documents that you submitted. Generally, you would have 30 days to cure any deficiencies once the analyst has identified them. But please reach out to them proactively just to see where they are in the review and whether or not they've already tried to reach out to you.
Let's see. Lanisha Key asks, is there still open for a tier one applicants to apply for delivery licensing?
Verified social equity individual applicants have the ability to apply for the non-storefront delivery commercial cannabis license through the DCR licensing portal. So yes.
Thanks. Christina L asks, can a social equity applicant sell their percentage? If so, is there a rule for how much money they have to sell it for, or is that a decision for the business owners and the new applicant?
I would refer you to the Los Angeles Municipal Code. Once a license has been issued, DCR can consider ownership changes or entity substitutions. And then depending on whether the existing, hypothetically, if it's a corporation and the social equity individual applicant owns shares in the corporation, they would have the ability to sell their shares to somebody who meets the social equity criteria. Alternatively, if they're not going to be pursuing that opportunity as the existing applicant licensee, the business entity that holds the license, you could do an entity substitution where a different entity that meets the social equity criteria and requirements under 10420 would have the opportunity to pursue licensure. But I would recommend reaching out to your assigned analyst to see whether or not your record is even eligible for either an ownership modification or an entity substitution. And then the municipal code lays out the rules for when DCR can consider those types of changes.
Christina L also asks, is there a date for the PCN process? If not, when will we know?
Um, so there's not a date for the next round of the PCN process. That wouldn't open until sometime in 2024. And we would be working with stakeholders to try to give them advance warning of when that process may reopen.
Our next question comes from Al. Will the end of year 2023 DCR annual deadlines be extended?
No, they won't. Those are set by ordinance already. So the renewal deadline, we're already in the late renewal period, which runs through December 31st. And anybody who hasn't timely renewed a license by December 31st will have to cease operating until a new license is issued. And ultimately, the late renewal process runs through the end of February 2024. And if a record has not been timely renewed by that date in March, it would be the status would either go to expired license or it would just be an expired record.
Rabin W. asked, what is needed to do a soft opening once the state license and provisional license have been given to a dispensary location?
Once a licensee has met the requirements, to operate. They have their state license, their city license, and all of their necessary permits. They have the ability to begin to operate and utilize those licenses.
MS asks, the most recent PCN process did not include the Sun Valley Community Plan area. Does this mean that there are available storefront licenses in Sun Valley?
At the time we opened the PCN process, the Sun Valley Community Plan area had fallen below the threshold. Um, it could have been that a license was, or an application was abandoned. It could have been that a license was relocated to a different community plan area. But at the time we did the calculation to determine undue concentration, there weren't a sufficient number of licenses for Sun Valley to be considered unduly concentrated.
Thank you, Jason. Tim A asks, can you please provide a date when CEQA notices of exemption will be issued to applicants and licensees in the city of LA?
So the earliest that's going to happen is like April or May of next year. The notice of exemption are what get filed with the county clerk once an annual license has been adopted. So the issuance of a notice of completion and starting the formal adoption for an annual license is what's going to trigger the notice of exemption to get filed with the county clerk. And because of the timing and the deadlines for that to happen, it won't be until April or May of next year. We had provided draft copies of the notices of exemption for folks that were seeking to renew their state provisional licenses. But the actual final ones can't be filed until either the director or the Cannabis Regulation Commission have adopted the recommendation to issue an annual license.
Sunshine PE asks, excuse me, if I request a final inspection for licensing from DCR this month, how soon can it happen?
You're not going to be able to request a final inspection from DCR because you would have to have an annual license in order for that to happen. But if you're requesting an initial inspection for the purposes of getting temporary approval, if you're eligible for temporary approval, generally that'll get scheduled within 1 to 2 weeks. On our website, there are instructions for how to make a request for an initial inspection, and you'll have to provide DCR with at least 3 tentative dates that you would be available for that inspection.
Moving on from Peter, how long do cultivation licenses with temporary approval and state provisional licenses have to complete the health department emblem program?
You should be working on that as quickly as possible. Again, DCR has the authority to implement commercial cannabis law and issue commercial cannabis licenses. And I don't know when the health department or other agencies are going to begin to cite folks for non-compliance with their sections of the code. So if you're able to go through the site evaluation process, it's in your best interest to initiate the conversation with the LA County Public Health Department and get your site evaluation request submitted as quickly as possible.
Christian asks, now that applicants have 3 additional years until December 31st, 2026 to enter the license application process, is DCR currently receiving pre-apps for Phase 3 retail round 2 lottery applicants?
Folks that were selected to participate in Phase 3 retail round 2 have the ability to submit new pre-application requests. And then you can just have one pending pre-application request or application before the department at any time.
Anahi asks, Do you need to have a certificate of occupancy and operating permit before the final CEQA determination is issued?
No. The operating permit is issued after either the director or the Cannabis Regulation Commission have made a determination to issue an annual license. And then once you have your annual license, you'll need to seek your state annual license and then make sure you have all of your permits with public health, building and safety, fire department, if applicable, before you can actually request your final inspection. And then once you've passed your final inspection, then and only then would you be eligible for an operating permit.
A question from Rafi S. Are we able to transfer a cultivation license to another CPA at this time? Also, I don't see nursery license option on the website. Is this still available?
So a license can be transferred to a community plan area that has not reached undue concentration. So if you have a cultivation license, there's the possibility that you could relocate it to another CPA. If you have questions, I'd recommend looking at the website and or reaching out to your analyst. And then in terms of the nursery license, we are still accepting nursery applications from verified social equity individual applicants.
Our next question comes from MS. Would a 4013 form be deemed acceptable if the applicant only checked off yes or no for each question and did not provide detailed specific info or cite any sources?
I don't know. I mean, it's really going to depend on what the yes no questions are. Of course, if the question is not applicable to the business and you mark no, then the expectation is you wouldn't have to provide additional information. But there are certain questions where you will have to provide more detailed information and or cite sources. So if your DCR analyst needs additional information, they're going to reach out and ask for it, and the document wouldn't be deemed complete until the information is provided.
A question and a follow-up from MS. Do cultivators need to worry about being capped out if there are a plethora of cultivators who are trying to relocate to a new CPA? For example, I believe the Sylmar CPA has 5 spots available. What if 20 different cultivators submit a modification to relocate to Sylmar?
So again, this is one of those nuances within the code. Phase one and phase two applicants were not subject to the finding of undue concentration. So to the extent that the application was accepted and pending within a community plan area, DCR has the authority to issue the license without that applicant having to get a PCN finding from the city council. So hypothetically, if Silmar had 5 spots available and 20 people submitted relocation requests and started the application process in Silmar, DCR would have the authority to issue all 20 licenses. Because undue concentration, of course, is not triggered until a sufficient number of licenses have been issued. And we don't accept new cultivation applications at this point. So it's either going to have to be a phase one business or a phase two business, which would not be subject to that undue concentration finding.
I believe our last question is from George. Our area has reached undue concentration. However, there are shops that are opening up. How does DCR determine and grant the new retail shop a license to operate?
Um, Again, there are certain phases that the applicant was not subject to a finding of undue concentration. So, for instance, phase one and phase two, um, as part of phase one, Central City and Central City North, which is the downtown area, was already considered unduly concentrated. So when the mayor and council were developing the original commercial cannabis regulations, they exempted phase one and phase two applicants from a finding of undue concentration. So if we could only issue 5 licenses and there were 8 applicants in that area, we would have the authority to issue all 8 licenses without the applicants having to get a PCN finding from the council. So, if an area has reached undue concentration and new shops are opening up, it's either because the applicants in that geographic area are exempt from the finding of undue concentration, or they already went through a public convenience or necessity process such that um, they have the necessary finding for DCR to issue a license.
Thank you, Jason. I'm not seeing additional questions on the queue.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for coming in today, and our next virtual lunch Q&A will be on Wednesday, January 10th at noon. So I look forward to answering more questions next month. Thank you all, and have a great day. Bye.